Hello everyone. Thank you for coming back to the channel. Recently, a major turning point has occurred. The man who was involved in the plot against CEO Toan has turned himself in at the police station, revealing secrets that had been hidden for a long time. While he has confessed to his crimes, the truth about CEO Toan's mother, the mastermind behind everything, remains a huge mystery. As these secrets slowly come to light, the tension in the air is sure to change everything. Today's story continues with intense moments in CEO Toan's journey to recover his memories and the enduring love that lytudiem has patiently waited for. After losing his memory, CEO Toan found peace at the old woman's grapefruit orchard, where he and lytudiem began a new life. Although his memories are still blurry, he has found warmth and calm in lytudiem's love. Will CEO Toan be able to overcome the ghosts of his past to live a peaceful life with lytudiem? And what challenges will their relationship face as the truth about the past is slowly revealed? Stay tuned for the next developments in this dramatic story. If you love this journey of love and recovery, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next episodes. Wishing you all a happy and joyful day with your family. Now let's begin the story. In the morning at the police station, the atmosphere became tense as the main door opened. A middle-aged man dressed simply walked in with an expression that showed no emotion. He walked straight up to the front desk, where the officer was busy writing notes. The room suddenly fell silent, and everyone could sense something unusual was happening. This man was one of the two individuals hired by CEO Toan's mother to come to lytudiem's farm with the goal of forcing her out of the house and also harming CEO Toan. The act was carried out ruthlessly under the orders of the old woman behind it all. But now the psychological burden had become too much for one of the men to bear. He approached the desk and placed his hand on the counter. "Officer, I want to turn myself in," he said in a deep, steady voice, showing no sign of hesitation. The officer looked up, eyeing the man with suspicion. "What do you want to turn yourself in for?" he asked. The man closed his eyes for a moment, as if recalling what he had done. "For what I did to CEO Toan and lytudiem? I was involved in the plan to harm them, and I can't live with this guilt anymore." The officer was taken aback, immediately standing up. He gestured for the man to sit down while continuing to take notes. This was a crucial turning point, not just a criminal turning himself in, but also a sign that the dark truths behind the conspiracy were about to be revealed. The officer began to interrogate the man, asking a series of questions about those behind the scheme, particularly about CEO Toan's mother. The officer sat across from him, his gaze sharp, while the man could only remain silent, his face filled with anxiety. "So where is she?" the officer asked firmly. "CEO Toan's mother. She was the one who directed everything. You must know where she is." The man scratched his head, looking down at the ground, seemingly unable to face the harsh truth of what he had been involved in. I don't know. She only appears when necessary. Usually she communicates everything through intermediaries. We just followed orders." The officer furrowed his brow, pushing harder. "Are you sure she gave you the orders, and now you're not just a pawn? If you know anything, you need to speak up." The man took a deep breath, lowering his head. "I don't know where she is, but I heard she left the country. She might have flown abroad. There are rumors that she's preparing to go into hiding." The officer made a note of this information. A slight look of concern crossed his face. This was crucial. If true CEO Toan's mother was somewhere avoiding punishment, and she might have been planning her escape from the very beginning. "Thank you," the officer said quietly. "We will investigate further." The officer nodded, saying no more. He stood up, opened the interrogation room door, and gestured for the man to follow. The two walked down a long hallway where the dim neon lights cast a cold glow. The officer led him to a small holding cell, locking the door after pushing him inside. "You'll stay here for a while," the officer said in a flat tone. "We'll take more statements later. Try to cooperate. Don't make things harder than they need to be." The man stepped into the room, his eyes filled with worry. The sound of the cold steel door locking echoed behind him. Thu sat alone at the table, the silence broken only by the steady ticking of the clock. He lowered his head, his eyes tired, his hand brushing over the phone on the table. Lytudiem still hadn't come home, and he didn't know what to do next in this search. Suddenly his phone buzzed. Thu glanced at the screen, not surprised to see an unfamiliar number. He hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "Hello, Thu. I have new information about the man who harmed CEO Toan." The voice on the other end said cold but clear. "He turned himself in this morning." Thu flinched slightly, his heart racing a little faster. "So he's confessed everything?" Thu asked, his voice tense. "Yes, but it's more complicated than you think. We can't be sure about CEO Toan's mother yet. There are still many details unclear." Thu hung up the phone and stared into the stillness before him. Things were slowly becoming clearer, but he couldn't relax. The missing pieces would change everything. He stood up, his heart filled with determination. Even though everything was far from over, in the interrogation room, the tension was thicker than ever. The officer sat across from the man, the light above casting long shadows across his face, as if mirroring the weight of the words about to be spoken. After receiving the initial statement, the officer decided to push further, hoping to extract more information from the man. "You were involved in her plan, weren't you?" The officer asked, his tone stern, leaving no room for evasion. The man looked down at the table, his eyes filled with anxiety. But upon hearing the question, he took a deep breath and looked up. It seemed as though he had steeled himself to tell the truth. "Yes, I was involved in her plan." He began, his voice trembling but firm. "She didn't act alone. She had another ally. The two of us were hired by her to carry out everything." The officer listened intently, his gaze never leaving the man. "So what did she do? How did you and your accomplice carry out the plan?" "She told me to go to Lytudiem's farm. She said we had to force her out of the house, told me she didn't deserve to live there." The man continued, his voice growing weaker as he recalled the details. "She didn't just have Lytudiem kicked out, but she also ordered me and my accomplice to hit CEO Toan in the head with a stick." He paused for a moment, his voice catching, as if he couldn't believe what he had done. "When I saw him pass out, my accomplice, and we dumped him in an empty lot nearby." The officer pushed further. "So what happened after that? Do you know what happened to CEO Toan?" The man shuddered at the memory. "Soon after I left him there, I went back to check, but he wasn't there anymore. No trace of him at all." He lowered his head as if unwilling to continue, but was compelled to speak. "Maybe he woke up and left, but I don't know. I didn't dare go back again." The officer made a note of every word. This was crucial information. The case was becoming even more complicated with the man's admission of CEO Toan's mother's involvement. However, CEO Toan's disappearance without a trace only made things more unclear. Are you sure you didn't see him anywhere else after that? The officer asked, his tone tinged with doubt. Absolutely, the man affirmed. I searched thoroughly, but there was nothing. He could have been taken somewhere else. The officer sat in silence for a moment, processing everything he had just heard. This was a tricky situation. CEO Toan's mother had clearly set up a detailed plan, and now where she was a bigger question than ever. In the small house of the old woman, the morning air felt warmer than usual. Lytudiem stood by the window, looking out at the grapefruit orchard, the place where she and CEO Toan had first reunited. The memory of the embrace in the orchard was still vivid in her mind, but this time she didn't want anyone to know, not even the police. She turned around, her gaze landing on CEO Toan's face. He sat there silent, like a stranger, but also strangely familiar. Though he had regained his memory, everything related to the past was still blurry for him. She knew he needed time to adjust to this new life, and she didn't want to do anything that would make things more complicated. Are you okay? Lytudiem asked softly. CEO Toan looked at her, his eyes a bit confused, but he smiled. I'm fine. Thank you for always being there, he said. Lytudiem didn't respond immediately. She just sat down next to him, her heart heavy. She knew keeping the truth hidden wasn't easy, but if everything came to light too soon, it could all fall apart. The police were still looking for answers, but she couldn't let them expose everything before CEO Toan was ready to face the truth. She just wanted a little more time, a little peace, so that they could truly find themselves in this life before the outside world barged in too soon. The police wouldn't know, and the old woman didn't need to worry. She would protect him, protect their relationship. The afternoon sunlight gently filtered through the green leaves of the grapefruit trees, brightening the vast orchard. Lytudiem and CEO Toan sat on an old wooden bench, side by side, but not too close. Neither of them said anything, simply watching the orchard in front of them. The sound of the leaves rustling in the breeze was like a soft background tune, making the atmosphere even more peaceful. CEO Toan looked around, his eyes deep in thought, but perhaps because of this calm, he felt more at ease. There was no noise, no rush, just this space, and the girl next to him. Lytudiem watched him, sensing the silence within him, but she didn't want to rush anything. She knew he needed time. Each day spent with him made her understand more about his quiet nature. A man who had once lived in the chaos of the outside world, now finding peace in this simple life. Do you remember the first time we met? Lytudiem broke the silence, speaking gently. CEO Toan looked at her, his eyes showing a hint of surprise, but there was no panic or discomfort. He simply shook his head and said softly, "No, but could you tell me about it?" Lytudiem smiled, her face lighting up with joy when he asked. She remembered very clearly the first time they met, a very special memory. We met for the first time at a small cafe near your company. Lytudiem began, her voice soft, like telling an old story. You were in a hurry, and I was just passing by, planning to grab a cup of coffee to go. CEO Toan smiled slightly. I must have looked really busy, huh? Yes. Lytudiem nodded. You looked like you were in a rush. At that time, I thought you were a very serious person, maybe always focused on work. Is that so? CEO Toan chuckled. Did I seem hard to approach? Lytudiem shook her head. No, I just thought you were very professional with no time for anything outside of work. She paused for a moment, then continued. But then, you invited me to sit down and talk. You weren't like I imagined. What did you feel then? CEO Toan asked, his eyes still focused on her. Honestly, I was really surprised, Lytudiem admitted, because you were such an important person, but you were willing to sit down and talk to me. Someone not very significant. I thought you might just want to kill time. So what happened next? CEO Toan asked, wanting to know more details. Lytudiem smiled, her eyes sparkling. We talked a lot. You told me about your work, about the challenges you face every day. I remember you said, no matter how busy work is, you must find time to do things that make you happy. CEO Toan looked at her intently, a soft smile forming on his lips. Really? I don't remember saying that. Lytudiem smiled gently, replying, You did say it, and that's one of the reasons I felt you were such a special person. At that moment, the space between them seemed warmer, as if those simple words had bridged the distance between them. CEO Toan sat quietly, not saying anything more, but his eyes had changed. She didn't know if he could remember everything, but at least he could still feel the closeness in her words. So after that, what did you think of me? CEO Toan continued, his voice softer now, as if trying to understand her feelings more. You're a very hard person to read. Lytudiem laughed lightly, but also very easy to approach, easy to share with. He smirked. So am I someone you like? Lytudiem looked at him, her eyes full of sincerity. At that time, I didn't think about liking you, but you made me feel comfortable, and gradually I realized I had feelings for you. This time, CEO Toan didn't respond immediately. He smiled, then quietly looked out at the grapefruit orchard. Everything around them was calm, but inside him emotions stirred. The old memories hadn't fully returned, but through Lytudiem's stories he felt something inside him awakening. I think, CEO Toan said, his voice lowering, we can rebuild everything from the beginning, right? Lytudiem looked at him, her eyes full of faith. Yes, no need to rush. We'll find everything we've lost, but as long as we have each other, everything will be all right. The afternoon sunlight slowly filtered through the grapefruit leaves, lighting up the lush garden. The sweet fragrance of the grapefruit blossoms filled the air, and the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze made the space feel unusually peaceful. Lytudiem and CEO Toan sat together, but this time, the silence between them no longer felt as heavy as before. It was just an ordinary afternoon like any other day, but it carried a deeper meaning for both of them. Lytudiem looked at CEO Toan, her gaze gentle and sincere. He still couldn't remember everything, though. Blurry fragments of memories occasionally surfaced. The stories of the past seemed distant in his mind, like a thin veil hiding everything. Yet, he didn't seem confused or disappointed. He just sat there quietly, as if waiting for something to happen. How do you feel? Lytudiem asked, her eyes filled with concern, though she didn't want him to feel the pressure from her. CEO? Toan looked up, his gaze unfamiliar, yet oddly familiar. He smiled softly, a warm smile with a hint of sadness. I feel like something is getting close, but I can't reach it. It's like there's something in my head, but when I try to remember it, just slips away. Lytudiem gently placed her hand over his, a small gesture, but full of comfort. "Don't try too hard, okay?" she said, her voice soft, filled with patience. "Your memories will come when you're ready. Don't worry too much about it." CEO Toan looked at her, his gaze a little surprised, but then it softened. He knew in those words there was a truth he hadn't considered. He had spent so much time trying to regain his lost memories, but it seemed that the more he tried, the more everything became unclear. "Aren't you really worried?" he asked, his voice a little deeper. "Aren't you afraid that if I can't remember, everything won't work out?" Lytudiem smiled lightly, her eyes full of certainty and steadiness. "No, I'm not afraid. I believe you'll get everything back when the time comes. Your memories haven't disappeared. They just need time to come back to you." CEO Toan fell silent, her words like an invisible source of encouragement, making him feel lighter. He wasn't sure if it was the truth in her words, but he felt a calm spreading within him. "I've always felt that you're someone special," he said, his voice gentle. "There's something in the way you look at life, in the way you live, that makes me feel at peace. Even though I can't remember everything, I feel like we've had a beautiful part of life together." Lytudiem smiled, but her smile had a tinge of sadness. "You've always been special to me, right from the first time we met. Whether you remember or not, I'll still be here with you. We'll write our story again from the beginning." She looked at him, then gently rested her head on his shoulder. They sat in silence for a while, only the sound of the wind and the rustling leaves around them. Lytudiem could feel the warmth of his body radiating toward hers. Even though he couldn't remember the old memories, she knew he was still the man she loved, and she believed he would slowly find his way back to himself. "I don't know what to do next," CEO Toan said, his voice full of fatigue. "When I remember, everything might change. Do you think we can continue like this, even though everything is still unclear?" Lytudiem looked up, staring directly into his eyes, her gaze full of determination. "We can. Everything will come in time. I believe in us. I believe in you, in our love." Deep inside, she knew that no matter what, they would find a way to move forward. She believed that love and patience would be the keys to unlocking the door to their future, even though CEO Toan's past was still uncertain. "I won't rush anymore," CEO Toan said, his voice much softer now, as if he had found peace in Lytudiem's words. "I'll let everything come slowly, and I won't let you go through this alone." Lytudiem smiled, her gaze gentle. "I'll never let you go through this alone. You don't have to worry." The space between them no longer felt tense or suffocating. It had become warm and comfortable. Even though CEO Toan couldn't remember everything, he felt something more important: Lytudiem's love and patience. That was enough for him to believe that everything would be okay, even if the past might never return to how it was before. They sat together by the window, where the afternoon sunlight filtered through the wooden frame, casting light onto the grapefruit orchard outside. The scenery was peaceful, the air fresh and clear, as if it helped them open up and share things that had never been said before. Lytudiem looked out at the orchard, but her mind never left CEO Toan. She could sense the relief in him, but she also knew that the pieces of his memory he hadn't recovered yet would eventually intertwine with the moments they were sharing together. They had each other, but perhaps there was still something missing. "How do you feel?" Lytudiem asked softly, not wanting to disturb his quiet. but unable to keep her worry hidden. CEO Toan looked out the window, his gaze distant, as if trying to gather the scattered pieces of his memories. "I still can't remember everything he said," in a calm voice. "There are many things that flash through my mind, but when I try to recall them, they slip away." "Still, what you've said, what I feel, that's clear." Lytudiem smiled, her eyes filled with reassurance. "Don't rush. The memories will come when you're ready. Sometimes we can't force it, because everything will return at the right time." CEO Toan turned back to look at her, his eyes softening. "You always say such comforting words, but I know not everything is easy. You've had to endure so much these past times, so what should I say?" Lytudiem laughed lightly. "We've already overcome so much. I just want you to understand that even if you don't remember anything, I'm still here. Both of us will never give up." For the first time in a long while, CEO Toan felt the warmth, the certainty in Lytudiem's words. He had always known she was strong, but now he truly felt that strength. She wasn't just someone who loved him. She was his companion, his biggest support. "I don't know if I deserve all of this," CEO Toan said, his voice soft, but with a hint of unease. "I've lost so much, and now it's just you and the old woman. Aren't you afraid?" Lytudiem looked at him, her eyes sincere. "No, I'm not afraid. Because I know if we're together, we can get through anything. You don't need to worry about the past anymore. What's most important is that we have each other, and we'll rebuild our life from what we have left." CEO Toan took her hand, his warm hand gently gripping hers, as if confirming that he was ready to face everything. "You've always been the one who makes me feel the most grounded," he said. "Whether the memories come back or not, I will always remember that you were the only one who stayed with me when everything fell apart." Lytudiem gently held his hand, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body. "I'll always be here. Everything will be okay." They sat quietly, without needing to say anything more. The space between them felt filled with peace, with the belief in a future that no longer seemed so far off. The world outside remained the same, the grapefruit orchard still heavy with fruit, the leaves rustling in the wind. But inside, they felt a peace they had never known before. The next day, Lytudiem and CEO Toan returned to their usual routine at the farm. CEO Toan helped the old woman prune the grapefruit trees, while Lytudiem went to the market to sell the fruit. Even though he couldn't remember everything, CEO Toan began to find joy in these simple tasks. He no longer felt strange, doing them as if they had been part of his life for a long time. When they returned, Lytudiem asked him, "Do you remember the time we went camping together? Do you remember you helped me set up the tent and cook, and we sat and talked under the starry sky?" CEO Toan paused, his eyes lighting up a little. "That time. Didn't you cook a dish that I really liked? You said it was your special dish, but I can't remember." Lytudiem nodded, a smile appearing on her face. "That's right. You said it was the best meal you've ever had. Do you remember when you smiled and said that you wanted us to make that dish every year?" CEO Toan closed his eyes, shaking his head gently. "I don't remember clearly anymore, but you're right, that feeling does feel very familiar. You always do simple things, but they're so special, making me feel at peace and happy." Lytudiem smiled, her eyes gentle. "As long as you feel that way, that's all that matters. I'll always do simple things, so we can be happy together." They continued talking, and though the memories hadn't returned fully through the small stories, the pieces of the past began to come back. Not everything, but it was a big step forward for CEO Toan in recovering his memories and finding himself again. In the following days, lytudiem and CEO Toan grew closer. They worked together, shared simple and warm moments together. CEO Toan no longer felt alone in this world. He had found himself in lytudiem's stories, in the simple yet meaningful work they did together. Whenever he felt lost, lytudiem was there, steady and patient, pulling him back, reminding him that the memories would come when he was ready. She didn't expect him to remember everything quickly, but simply wanted him to live fully in the present, and together, they would build a new life. The old woman was always there for them, like a mother watching over them from behind, but not interfering too much in their lives. She had given them not only a home, but also the chance to rediscover themselves and find what they had lost. Though CEO Toan's past remained unclear for lytudiem, the most important thing was the present. The days they spent together building a future without worrying about the past. The days that followed were simple, yet meaningful for both lytudiem and CEO Toan. As the seasons changed, so did the rhythm of their lives. The orchard bloomed with fresh fruit, and the gentle winds seemed to carry a sense of peace and renewal. CEO Toan, still struggling to fully reclaim his memories, found solace in the routine they had established. He learned to enjoy the small moments, the quiet mornings spent sipping coffee by the window, the afternoons spent tending to the land, and the evenings filled with conversations that made him feel more and more connected to the life he was building with lytudiem. The old woman, always present in the background, became a silent but steady presence in their lives. She never interfered too much, always allowing them the space they needed while offering her wisdom when it was sought. Her health was fragile, but her spirit remained strong, a quiet testament to the resilience of those who had weathered storms in their past. She had always been the backbone of this place, and now, in a sense, she was watching her efforts bear fruit once more, not just in the orchard, but in the lives of the two young people who had found their way back to each other. Despite the peace that settled over their lives, there were still moments of doubt. CEO Toan's memories, although coming back in bits and pieces, were never fully restored. He often felt as though he was missing a part of himself, like a puzzle with several key pieces still scattered and out of reach. lytudiem noticed the quiet struggle in his eyes, the moments when his gaze would wander, and she knew that the past still weighed heavily on him. She never pushed him to remember, though. Instead, she encouraged him to live in the present, to let their shared moments be the foundation upon which they could build their future together. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch of the small house, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow over the landscape. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the faint hum of life around them created an atmosphere of quiet contentment. lytudiem leaned back in her chair, her eyes closed, letting the calmness of the moment wash over her. CEO Toan sat next to her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "What do you think of when you look out there?" lytudiem asked softly, her voice breaking the silence. CEO Toan turned to her, his eyes filled with both curiosity and a quiet sense of longing. "I think about how peaceful everything is now," he said slowly. "How things have changed so much from what they were before. I think about what's still missing, though. I feel like there's still a part of me That's incomplete. Lytudiem reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. We'll find it, she said with confidence. You're not incomplete, Toan. You're right here with me, and that's all we need. He looked down at her hand in his, the warmth of her touch grounding him. But I still don't remember everything, he whispered, the doubt still lingering in his voice. What if I never do? Lytudiem smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. You don't have to remember everything, Toan. We're building our life together now. We don't need the past to define us. What matters is that we're here and we're moving forward. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The words they had shared were enough, and in the silence, they both found a sense of peace. In the past, they had been driven by uncertainty, by a sense of something missing. But now, with every passing day, they were learning to embrace what they had in front of them. They weren't perfect, and their journey wasn't without its struggles, but they were together, and that was enough. As the months went by, the small farm continued to thrive. Lytudiem and CEO Toan worked side by side each day, bringing new challenges, but also new joys. The orchard became a symbol of their resilience, the trees growing stronger with each passing season, just as they were. Lytudiem's gentle encouragement helped CEO Toan find his footing, and in return, his steady presence gave her the strength she needed to face the future with optimism. They had both learned that life wasn't about perfection or remembering every detail. It was about the moments they shared, the love they built, and the future they created together. One afternoon, as they sat under the shade of the grapefruit trees, Lytudiem turned to CEO Toan with a smile. Do you remember the first time we sat here? She asked. CEO Toan looked at her, his expression softening. I remember bits and pieces. I remember feeling at peace, even though I couldn't place why. She nodded, her eyes twinkling with a quiet knowing. That's what matters. The feeling. It's not about the past. It's about how we feel now. He smiled, the weight that had once seemed so heavy on his shoulders, now lighter than it had ever been. I think I'm starting to understand that. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow across the land, Lytudiem and CEO Toan sat together, not needing to say anything more. The future was still unknown, but they no longer felt the need to fear it. They had each other, and with that, they knew they could face whatever came their way. The world around them seemed to stand still, as if recognizing the peace they had found. The orchard, once a symbol of uncertainty and loss, was now a place of growth and renewal. And as they sat together watching the sun set on another day, they knew that this was only the beginning of their story. Together they would write the next chapter. A chapter filled with love, hope, and the promise of a future they would build side by side, one step at a time. And as the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Lytudiem rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of the world lift, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other. Everything will be okay, Toan, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling of the leaves. We've made it this far, and we'll make it through anything together. And for the first time in a long time, CEO Toan felt a peace settle over him, a peace he hadn't felt in years. He didn't need to remember everything. He just needed to be here in this moment, with the woman who had never let him go, and with the woman who had taught him that sometimes the most important thing was not the past, but the future they were building together. And as the night wrapped its quiet arms around them, they knew they were ready for whatever came next. because they had each other, and that was all they needed.